Hi, I'm Fay, and this is my wife,
Sherry.
and this is our story. We moved down to North Carolina from New York about 2 years ago, and we got hooked up with St. Lee Chapel, and after some time we became worship leaders, Sherry and I, at Life Springs Church. A Sunday in March, we had both driven to church, and we'd taken separate cars because sometimes we have to bring equipment back and or go different places afterward. And this particular Sunday, we had made lunch plans with Sherry's son and daughter-in-law, and so she had driven home first, and I was following her, and she'd gotten out of sight, and a little ways down the road, I finally caught up with her. I come around a corner, and I see her, and at the same time, I see what looks like a big SUV trying to dart across the road to get to a driveway or another road in front of her, and I saw that her collide right into the side of the SUV, and it was a pretty violent accident. I just distinctly remember seeing glass flying up everywhere and her rear end of her car going up in the air and spinning around and side impacting and then going off the road out of sight. And it was like a surreal moment. And driving right behind her, I was a little ways behind, so I just floored it to get to her, and I just see, smoke rolling up out of the car, and it was just looked really, a huge bad impact. The SUV was rolled over us on its side, half of it was caved in, and couldn't see into the car because all the airbags were deployed, so I ran across to the driver's side, and I saw Sherry inside, and she had airbag in her face, and her nose was bleeding, and she was like as white as a ghost. And I asked her if she was okay, and she said that she wasn't, that she was in a lot of pain. She was having a hard time breathing, she was having a hard time talking, and she goes, "But I know my leg's broken." At the same time I got there was a car in front of me and some behind me and people coming from the other way, and it looked like some of those had some medical training, so I kind of let them do their thing, unpack the situation, and tried to call 911 right away, and went around to the passenger side of the car and tried to force that door open so that I could, be with her while other people were trying to take care of her. And do you remember the first thing you said to me when we got there?
Yeah, I do. The first thing I said to him, I asked him if my nose was broke, and he said, "Yup." And I asked him if it was bad enough for a nose job, and he said, "No." And I said, "Dang, is my car broke?" He said, "Yup." I said, "Can I have my Mustang now?" And he said I could have whatever I wanted.
Well, actually, just a point of correction. Your first thing you said to me, "It wasn't my fault."
Oh, yeah.
Just over and over, "It's not my fault." And I reassured her, of course, that I knew that it wasn't, that I was behind her. So when they finally got her out of the car, she was on a stretcher, and I saw her foot, and I thought the impact was so hard that it knocked her socks off, because sometimes the sock is kind of, you pull it off part way and it's at an angle, but no, her sock wasn't off. That was her foot. It was all twisted up, and so we got her to the hospital, and they looked. She had broken ribs, broken foot, where leg bone was coming out the bottom, and her other foot was broken. She broke her wrist, ribs, sternum, nose. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's it. I don't like not being in control, and even though I say God's in control of my life, there's a certain amount of control we like to take. But lucky for me, the Lord and I have been around this for a really long time, and I've learned that I really don't have control. But it just seemed to me we had plans. We had plans to buy a house, we had plans for all of this, and then all of a sudden, in a minute, not even a minute, a second, everything just came to a standstill, and it didn't matter what plans we had, because there I was, I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, I couldn't do anything for myself. And I realized, when I started to spiral, I realized, I could hear the Lord's voice say, "You need to take yourself out of this situation," and I did. I went to prayer, and like I said, I'm no big giant, but I know when I've had it, and I know where it is. And through the whole thing, I just, like Faye knew what I was doing, because people were asking me questions, and I was, they were annoying me, asking me questions, because I was praying the whole time, because I just couldn't deal with the whole situation at all. And I just removed myself. And when I finally got to the hospital to even come to my own, when they had my pain under control, I started, thinking about what was going on. And I was pretty bitter about the situation. And all I could, remember the scripture that said, if you delight yourself in the Lord, he will give you the desires of your heart. So I'm like, yeah, so now everything's all changed for me. And the woman, in the meantime, the woman had contacted us, whose husband was in the other part of the accident, and she had said how sorry she was, and I just didn't want to hear any part of it. And Fay contacted her, and as time went on, he told me about it and asked me to pray about how I felt about it. And I did contact her, and I told her that I thought for the two of us, if we were going to bring glory to God through the whole situation, it would be the best thing to do would be to pray for each other. And her husband really, really hurt, worse than I was. I started thinking, I know if God put this in my path, because I belong to him, and no one can touch me without his permission, and if he gave the enemy permission to do this trial in my life, then there was something that had for me to learn in it, and some, that I had to go and see. And I kept praying about what it was, and I had thought it was that, I was just going to, make amends with this woman and tell her that I didn't feel bad about what happened and everything would be okay, and I just get up on my feet and go about my life and things would be good. But God being God, he knew my heart. And he knew more about this accident than I even knew, because 2 weeks ago I talked to my mom, and she said, we talked about the accident, and she said, and I didn't know this, but she said, when I heard about the accident and saw the pictures, she goes, I just fell on my face before God, and I told him that I would believe in him and give my heart to him if he would save your life. And now, I didn't know this. My mom, she's Jewish. And well, she believes in her God, or who she thinks God is, but she definitely does not know Jesus. And when she saw and she spoke to me and knew I was all right, she told me she fell on her face. And those aren't words that are familiar to her. But she said she fell on her face and thanked God for sparing my life, and said that. And she knew he was real because he answered her prayer. And so I realized that, if God said to me, would you do this to get your mother saved, I would have done it in a minute. I would have given my life for it. And I didn't even have to do that. I'm up, I'm walking around, I have a new car. My life is fine. Actually, things are actually better than they were before then. And so God is so good. He just knows what we need, even if we don't know our own desires. He knows, and he's just so good that he does these things for us.
The whole time that you were in the hospital, you didn't really know what would happen with all the bills and everything, and you were really stressed about that. And I knew from the beginning, from the time of the accident and till now, that you were going to be okay. I just knew it. And I knew that God would also take care of all these other things, and it has happened that way. The medical bills have been being paid. We were blessed by so many people donating money to help support us in that. Some of the things that didn't cover, like building a ramp for you to be able to get in and out of the house with the wheelchair. Flint actually came over and helped me build that by hand, and that was a blessing. And then to see the God's hand in it, and then finally to see that your legs are actually better than they were before the accident.
I think the biggest miracle to me was to understand when people came up to me and said how they were praying for me, and I had no idea that these many people, and I know people say Facebook isn't a good thing, but the outpouring on Facebook and things about people, that it really matters when you tell people that you're praying for them. And it was a miracle, because I shouldn't be walking. I was in the hospital. I was supposed to be there for a month. I was out of the hospital in a week and a half. I was out of the wheelchair in what? I don't even remember.
Week maybe.
Yeah, and I'm walking. I still have a little problem with stairs, but I'm old too. But
it took a while before she could think about driving another car or even wanting another car. And when she started thinking about it, she was like second guessing her Mustang thing. And so I did a lot of research for her. We looked at a lot of cars, but she did end up getting that Mustang after all.
Didn't get the nose job though. And I just want to, stand here today and say that I really believe that I am here today because of the prayers of everybody here. And I thank my church family, and I thank everybody who's said a prayer for us and who has supported us through this, because it means so much. It really does mean so much to know that you have people behind you who are praying for you and are your true brothers and sisters and backing you, and not just in the good times, but in the bad times too.